How do you live a life that is significant without striving, meaningful in the mundane, and overcomes in spite of obstacles? Welcome to The Conversation, the Significant Life podcast with Jen and Marcus Jones.
Well, welcome back to the Significant Life podcast. I'm Marcus.
And I'm Jen.
And Jen and I are super excited today to get to have a conversation with one of our dearest people. And you guys are in store for a good time, I think.
I was doing the math last night. I have known Tracy Dougherty, who you guys are about to hear from, since I was 25 years old. And I've known her for 24 years. You guys, now you do the math on that. But, and actually I was introduced to Tracy at a point of pain in my life. Someone's like, I was heartbroken. And someone that knew her said, oh, you need to meet Tracy. And Tracy took me to get a pedicure, and the rest is history. And so, Tracy, you've actually just been a meaningful person through many stages, through many seasons of my life. And I'm excited to have you on here. But could you just sort of why don't you tell us a little bit about you? We'll dive deep into it, like what you do, but just a little bit about, who you are, Trace.
Well, first of all, a pedicure solves everything when we're in pain. So
Right.
it's the only thing I knew to do, right? But I will say the Jones tribe, the two of you, your family, are such a mutual friendship. Like the exchange of life and love has been mutual for many, many years. And it seems like we've just kind of keep turning the corner and run back into each other. And there's not a lot of relationships that stay that way. A lot of times friendships are for seasons. So that's curious to me. Wow. We just keep staying in each other's lives.
Right.
So I do live in San Diego. So just right up from you guys. And we actually have lived in other states and places or other places. We follow each other.
I know.
But nevertheless, I am first and foremost a Jesus follower. I feel like I am the Father's favorite, and I will wrestle all of you and think you should feel so loved that you'll wrestle for that position. I feel so beloved of the Father. I have been the wife of Dan Dougherty for 31 years, and he's a character. If you know him, you love him, and you always
Dan
remember
Dougherty.
him.
Gotta love Double D.
Yes, we have four. Do I have 4 kids? I don't know. I must have had another one, but I have 3 children, and I have 2 married-in children. So actually, it's 5. And I have a granddaughter that I love, and it's just best season of my life. That's the nuts and bolts of.
Yes.
Well, I mean,
me.
you can already, if you're logging in here and clicking on and listening, you can already tell that Tracy is not only has this joy and this abundance. There's a vivacity to who she is, but she's also a person of deep conviction and faith. That her heart is deep water. Deep. And so part of what we wanted to do today, because Tracy in her ministry and leadership expression right now is leading an organization called Freedom Challenge. And I just feel like what she's doing is so dovetailed with now this kind of a cultural conversation that's happening right now around the topic of human trafficking. And so Tracy, would you just kind of talk a little bit about your work with Freedom Challenge, what you guys are doing to make a difference around the world, and just kind of dig into this topic a little bit today, because I just feel like it's sort of front of mind.
There's been a heightened awareness.
With
the sound of freedom being released. So Trace, tell us a little bit what you do with Freedom Challenge and how it's making a difference around the world.
Yeah, thank you. Well, first I'll say that let me define it this way. I come to the story of leading Freedom Challenge with a fierce mama bear heart. Right. I have been a nurturer of children, an advocate for women. I would say that a lot of my passion comes from the fact I would describe my husband and my dad as biblical feminist and desiring to see women empowered to the fullest. That is the capacity as image bearers, right? We are half the world And so there is that part of me, that essence of affirming the dignity of women and children. And we don't give dignity, we affirm the dignity that already exists and those that bear the image of Christ. So the Freedom Challenge, in essence, is an expression of a movement of passionate women coming from really all over the world that are raising funds and awareness for anti-human trafficking efforts. So the way that looks is we are a part of a greater organization that's been around for 65 years, sustainable, reputable, filled with integrity, which is really important, that is engaging the hearts and the hands, the empathic, God-given part of women to this conversation. It is standing in a place where we are, one, hearing stories and walking toward the pain of women and children all over the world that we may never know, but we know they exist, storytelling on their behalf, physically doing something that engages our whole self, and I'll tell you more about that in a minute, while raising funds that then go to projects, excellent projects around the world in some of the most harshest places. So we do focus on America, but mostly globally, because those are some of the places where women are most marginalized, most vulnerable. Both children have the least amount of voice. Women in America, we're gaining traction in our voice. So we really want to harness the power of that voice. So what does that look like? What does all that mean, Tracy?
Yeah, tell us.
Yes. So we have created alliances and support for 41 projects, much that have to do with prevention, right? If we can reach a life before it needs to be rescued, this is a good thing. This is a great thing. This is a win for humanity. Development, so that's economic empowerment, putting things in women's hands and children's hands that have a dignified way to move forward in life. And then rescue and restoration. That's the hard work. Oftentimes we focus on the rescue piece because that part of us as Westerners, we want to go kick down doors often, but there is a place and a process in the context of every situation that's both appropriate and helpful to those situations. So the funds that women, what do we do? How do we raise these funds? We have taken women all over the world. So if you could name a place, it's likely that we have been there or will be there. So we take women on really hard challenges, things that are pressing them to the limit, things that are causing them to dig deep with sisterhood, to be vulnerable, to level the playing field of women, bank presidents, women, children, mothers, fathers, not fathers. Men are not allowed. but level the playing field to do these extremely hard things. So some of those things, we've summited Kilimanjaro 3 times, Machu Picchu, the Grand Canyon. I mean, the list is extensive now. To date, in the last 10 years, we have raised approximately $8 million, and all of that, 100% of what women invite their peer and family to share and support them in, all goes to those endeavors. So that's a snapshot. We love to take women to places that expand their worldview, put them in challenging positions, and we just keep doing it. And women keep showing up.
Well, and I do love that. You say women keep showing up, and this girl right here knows about these things. And I'm challenged even listening to you because fear has actually held me back multiple times.
Right.
I could have climbed Kelly with you. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation so that it increases the awareness of what is the problems you're actually solving and the way you're doing it, and how we can get involved. And it is a risk.
Yeah.
But it's like the problem is worth the risk, and I can do something. And so it's just, it's called Freedom Challenge for a reason. And I know it's because you guys scale mountains and do things that are hard things to solve really hard problems that are happening around the world. And it's uncomfortable. And I think to make a difference, we do need to get uncomfortable. And so I do think that the scope of evil is is vast and big.
Mhm.
And as a lover of Jesus and a follower of Christ, I know that he wins. I know that we win. And I know that light, like darkness cannot survive the light, yet
Mhm.
the battle seems big.
Yeah.
And it seems like overwhelming. And I would like for you to just kind of share in your experience, because you've seen it firsthand. You're doing things to
Mhm.
help solve it. And then
Mhm.
you actually go into the places
Yeah.
that need these resources that are provided. Do you think that there is resistance to the light coming in? Do you see resistance to the light? And like, what is your experience in even bringing light to America, but then even as you go into the other parts of the world? Because I think that's some of the fear. That's some of the fear that is like, well, can we make a difference? Like, is it possible? What is the resistance of this darkness?
Yeah. So, right, the resistance is a tale as old as time, right? We humans, we can operate in greed, right? And covetousness. We want something that's not ours. We want more than what we, and I'm not trying to be simplistic, but it really goes down to the human heart, right? We want power. We as a human race, those who are not yet in a process of refinement and kind of submission to what it looks like to be on planet Earth as a co-creator and image bearer. So I think that there's this dark pull, right? And the pull is we want power over, right? That's the very beginning of this story. I would like to know more and be more and have more. And then there's these false attachments that have happened in the human race from brokenness, attaching themselves to comfort that's not comfort, attaching themselves to perversion because they feel little and they want power, right? There's all of these sub narratives. So there's resistance because there's economics, right? So if you think about the fact that a body can be sold over and over and over again, a drug is sold one time. So as people that are image bearers in the beginning, you know, the mandate was go and create the world, cause it to flourish, be in partnership with other co-creators and bring beauty. So when you distort that, what happens is there becomes a quest for power. There becomes a quest for more. There becomes a distortion for what I can have. So all of this is really framed in that bigger story. And apart from that, it's simply just a human rights violation. The other story is the triangle, right? It's the buyer, it's the seller, and it's the individual image bearer that is made to feel that they are a product, a product to be bought and sold. So who wants to resist that triangle? If you are benefiting from the power, right, is the buyer. There's something happening there. And the seller, the economics, and the product, the human being, is an image bearer that has all the rights that God bestowed upon them and is waiting for us to stand up with a voice to say, can I tell your story when you can't? Until you yourself can step out into a place of empowerment. So that it would be a simplistic version of 50 million people currently in 2021, 2022 being identified as being a part of modern day slavery and human trafficking.
Wow. I mean, the scale of it.
You spoke, Jennifer, to fear. So I think that fear is in the air like oxygen, right? We have to be careful what we inhale and realize what holds us back.
Yeah.
I will say I've been all over the world, really, truly, and I won't say some of those places for protection of those communities and you know, just keeping the dignity of cultures and not exposing some of the deeper areas in that. I think that's really important. We don't want to exploit areas of the world, but we want to do something about it. But I have been all over the world, and what I found to be true is that there is so much light. There is so much love, and there is far more of that than the story that the enemy wants to amplify. Yes, that story's true, but the greater story is that God is at work through human beings that desire to be helpful, to be loving, to be present. So I do want to say that sometimes that fear holds us back.
Yes.
And rightfully so. You know, the narratives that we hear in the world that we're living in are all about fear mongering and are not really elevating some of the real work that's being done. So I just want to say that and bring voice to that.
Well, Tracy, I think, as we're in this conversation and, Jen mentioned, we kind of talked at the beginning about this new movie that's out, The Sound of Freedom. And one of the things I think is pretty powerful about this moment culturally is you got a lot of people who are maybe coming into an awareness of this problem, this great evil that we were talking about for the first time, or maybe they'd heard about it, but didn't understand the scope or whatever.
Hadn't seen it.
Yeah. And so I think part of the power of the movie is the experience of it, obviously, to kind of, okay, this is on my radar now. But then there's also a desire for people, I think a lot of folks that they want to make a difference, don't really know how. And obviously you guys have been in this work, and so much of what you're describing in these challenges, and you're putting tangible, action steps for people to do. If you've got somebody who's listening right now and maybe they've seen the movie, or maybe stuff has come onto their awareness here recently, what would you say to that person? It's like, hey, here's a tangible next step that you can actually go and do something to make a difference. What would you say to that person?
Well, first I would say awareness is huge, right? It's hard to look at these things. And even more as Westerners, it's hard to behold them and walk toward them when you feel flooded with the inability to solve what is in front of you. This is very difficult, right? It's really rooted in control, which is often why we don't want to look at something. I'm thinking about, and I'm going to get to your question, but I want to frame it in a bigger story of why awareness is a big deal. Back in Genesis, there was Hagar. She was trafficked from her homeland in Egypt by the father of faith and his wife. And she was brought to a foreign land and became a surrogate. She was exploited to have a child for the benefit and the desire of another. And that whole story created a mess. But what I want to highlight about this is even then, our tendency not to want to look towards something when we're flooded and we feel out of control. It is uncomfortable. We want to turn away. So Hagar herself, she was the trafficked one. There's all kinds of ins and outs about this story, but God appeared to her. The only time that God appeared and named himself a name to a woman, and to a woman that would have been considered a trafficked woman, Hagar. He came to her twice in her plight, and he revealed himself as El Roi, the God that sees. And he named her child Ishmael, which was a child born out of the desires of two people that wanted to use another for their own benefit. Ishmael, which means the God that hears. God is always caring for the marginalized, the exploited, and those who are caught in some kind of system of disempowerment. It will always be his heart. And so in that story, we see that Hagar is actually sent out to the desert. And in this moment where she's in the desert, she's overwhelmed with what her future will be because of those that exploited her. It was just her and her son. And it was a bleak place. So it says in the narrative that she took her son and she put him under a tree and she turned her back because she was so pained with what she did not have to fix her situation. And there God reveals himself again and says, I see you, El Roi, the God that sees. I hear you through your son, the very one that has been the enemy to the whole situation. And I have your future planned. And in this moment, he said, he says, look at your son and walk toward him. This, mind you, is a woman who has been exploited by powerful people, named by God in scripture. And all of a sudden, she sees the story differently. She doesn't see what she doesn't have. She sees what is available. And she then sees the water and the tree that brought provision for her future. We are afraid to look or walk toward. But the very incarnation of Jesus was the very one that said, I take all of that power, I harness it into a body, embodied justice on behalf of another that doesn't have the power to do what needs to be done. So this movie brings into awareness something that we can choose. Will we look at and walk toward? Will we take the courage that when we look, we will have an appropriate step to involve ourselves? That's the right thing, not everything, but a piece, a slice. One of the reasons that Freedom Challenge was created was to actually find a way for everyday women to do something that was in their heart to do. And again, it's embodied justice. It's doing something and freedom for you and on behalf of the one you may not know, right? When we focus on the one, we see the many. So I pray that this movie, and I haven't seen it, by the way, but I will, sparks the heart of people to have the courage to ask deeper questions and have conversations.
Yes.
That's the number one thing I'm asking right now. I don't want people to scramble with, chaotic, jump in and do something. That is not biblical.
Right.
There's never chaos and alarm in heaven. There's a gentle walking toward, methodical, peaceful desire to create shalom in the world. And this is the center of God's heart. And we should all, I don't like to should people. It is incumbent upon us as human beings and Christ followers to ask deeper questions. What's my part?
I just have to feel like I have to say, interestingly, if you're listening to this, no matter like whether you're on a podcast vehicle or listening on YouTube, that as we've been going through this conversation with Tracy and talking about this issue, I think it's like super important not to overstate, but we literally have had more technical issues trying to get this conversation put forward than we have in the 2 years that we've been podcasting, literally. And so like all it does for us is like fill us with the greater resolve. We're like, nope, we're going to finish this conversation because it's this important. So Tracy, as we wrap up, help us frame this, kind of in a concluding thought, because it's such an important topic.
Yeah. I'm always going to go biblical worldview. And I just want to leave us with this. There's so much conversation around social justice, but I want to take biblical justice and I want to put it as a big box around social justice and say, this is God's idea. And the reason I know this is because scripture is filled with a long line of trafficked survivors. We're talking about Joseph. He was trafficked by his family. We're talking about Esther and the stories. Rahab, she was a prostitute, most likely forced into that because of who knows what. But the end of all of those stories are redemptive. And so when we look at this darkness, could we not glance on the enemy's work? Yeah, you're there, but gaze on the one who is justice. And he is the one that empowers us to do something, not everything. We're not superheroes. We shouldn't be. But what is in our hands and our hearts to do, would we do it with diligence and not minimizing the impact? I'm going to tell you one story as we leave. I have a friend. Her name is Rita. She was just in an event I was at. She shared with me this story, and it's about awareness. So maybe this is the commission. Every one of us should have the National Human Trafficking Hotline in our phone so that we can call and make a report if we see something. That's the number one thing. Put it in your phone. Number two, when we're aware, we see life differently. We're focused on things that may require something from us. She was on a flight, an international flight, sitting in first class, mind you. No judgment there. International flights and first class go hand in hand for those of us who can do that. But she saw an encounter that she had been educated about because she was curious. She had been listening to the stories. She'd been learning. And this was an encounter with an older gentleman and a younger girl, and something didn't feel right. There was a myriad of things that were warning and triggers to her because she got interested and she asked questions and she learned. She doubted herself. I don't know. Should I do something with this? I think I should. Went to the stewardess. Well, it turns out that the moment that this man was taken off the airplane, he was arrested because he was trafficking this girl. So here's a simple story of a woman who was just willing to start paying attention, not to be a vigilante, not to, go crazy, but to just see what was in front of her gaze and to responsibly respond with discernment. So at the end of this podcast, what I would say to you is put that number in your phone, ask questions, learn and walk toward. And there are a myriad of things that you can get involved with. Mind you, tend the children in your own life. Make sure they're educated, make sure they're well cared for and loved. And those in and of itself are really good things to do. Care for their friends, talk to their friends. These are all things that we can do. All right, that's it. And I invite you, any of you, to come to be a part of what we do. We have one slice of the pie. There's many, many things to do. And Marcus and Jen, you're dearest of dear. Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Thank you for bringing in the biblical perspective, because even as you speak and you share in context of God's word, my heart feels hope. Hope. I know that this side of heaven, we will not see full healing and full restoration in the world. The earth will still groan, and we are in desperate need of a savior. But to hear you and how for some, just be aware and begin to have the conversation and just be talking about it. And then that you, through Freedom Challenge, actually do provide some practical next steps for some to engage in. And so we're just so honored to call, I'm honored to call you friend.
Of course.
To call you friend. And we want to be a part of keeping the conversation going. I know there's some other upcoming things that people can participate in, and we will share every way to connect with Tracy in the show notes. It is Freedom Challenge. That is where you can find more about what her organization that she has been leading does to solve this problem that's happening around the world. And
and as Tracy was talking and sharing the work that she's doing, it caused me to smile inside, even in the face of such an amazing, incredible evil in the world, the darkness in the world, with this hope that Jesus had a habit of finding and walking into the places that were the absolute darkest. And when he showed up, the light always overcame the dark place. It doesn't work the other way around. Darkness doesn't overcome light. Light always overcomes darkness. And so what a hope that we have to lean into. And I like what Tracy's saying about actually just beginning to own our lightness and show up where we are and take the steps that are in front of us to take to just be who we are in this world. And that in fact is right at the center of our calling. That is perhaps the most significant, to borrow the word, thing that we can do with our lives is to just live the light of Jesus where we are, where we find places that are dark, we go walk into them. And we live that out loud. And so that's our challenge today, wherever we find ourselves.
And for some, that is the challenge. For others, you're doing that. And the challenge is, actually, I need to know more about what Tracy's doing, and I need to sign up for a walk. I need to actually raise some funds. I actually need to go into another part of the world. So, Tracy, thank you so much for your heart,
the work that you're doing.
The work that you're doing. We love you, and we're just honored to have you a part.
Yep. So, as we wrap up today, we will, if you take a look at the show notes, put the information that you could really use to get connected with Tracy and with Freedom Challenge and to take a step. But we're super glad that you've been a part of this conversation today. Just want to encourage you to go and be the light wherever it is that you live and walk and work and play. And we'll see you next time.